I know the exact time because I had been staring at my ceiling for 2 hours, counting the water stains, naming them, after planets I had no business knowing existed, the one above my left shoulder I called Varan, the long damp streak. Near the window I called the pale corridor. I had never told anyone that. It would have sounded like the beginning of a medical conversation I did not want to have. The bell rang again. I got up, my feet found the floor the way they always do, like they already knew the layout of every room I would ever live in. I pulled on a sweatshirt, I walked to the door in the dark without bumping into anything, which was normal for me, in the specific way that a lot of things were normal for me that probably should not have been. I assumed it was Dave. Dave lived in the unit next to mine and operated on a schedule entirely his own. He had knocked on my door at 2:00 in the morning once to ask if I had a lemon. I did not. He came back at 2:40 with a lemon and a look on his face like he had accomplished something significant. I opened the door. It was not Dave. She was tall in the way that restructures a door frame, 7 ft, maybe a little more, and the hallway light that usually turned everything the color of old margarine caught her and did nothing, because she was already lit. Not brightly, not like a lamp or a screen, more like the way the horizon looks right before the sun decides to show up, that thin line of color that has no right being as beautiful as it is. Her skin held markings, lines branching and geometric, running from her jaw down her throat and disappearing beneath the collar of something that was technically a coat. The markings pulsed slow. The color of them was a deep exhausted blue, the kind you only see at the very edge of the visible spectrum, the kind that makes the back of your eyes ache. I recognized that color. I did not know from where. She looked at me. Her eyes were not a color I could name in any language I officially spoke. They were steady and patient and ancient in the specific way that ancient things are not always old, but are always certain. She said, "I missed you, human. It is time to return." Her voice was low and precise, like someone who had learned English by reading every book ever written, and then decided tone was a separate subject to master later. Every word landed cleanly. No accent I could place, no hesitation. I stood there in my sweatshirt and socks. The hallway smelled like carpet cleaner, an old building, and whatever Dave had cooked the night before. The fluorescent bulb above her flickered once, decided against it, and went still. I said, "I have work tomorrow." She did not blink. She did not shift her weight or look away or perform any of the small fidgets that humans use to fill the space where a response should be. She simply waited, the way something waits when it has already decided the outcome and is only giving you the dignity of arriving at it yourself. My palms were itching. I looked down. It was the old marks, the ones along the inside of both hands that ran parallel and slight like seams. Every doctor who had ever seen them said the same thing in the same tone, which was the tone people use when they are filing something away rather than thinking about it. Birthmarks, they said. Unusual patterning, nothing to worry about. They were glowing, not brightly, the same exhausted blue as her markings. Slow pulse matched rhythm. I looked at her. I looked at my hands. I looked at her again. I closed the door. I stood in my entryway for a moment. Then I walked to the kitchen, filled a glass with water, and drank it standing at the sink, looking at the window above it, which showed me the dark courtyard and my own reflection, and nothing useful whatsoever. My hands had stopped glowing, or I had decided they had stopped glowing. I was not entirely sure which one was true, and I chose not to investigate. I stood there for 11 minutes, I know, because the clock on the microwave is the only clock in my apartment, and I have a habit of noting the time when I am trying to convince myself that what I am doing is rational. Then I walked back to the front door and opened it. She was still there. Of course she was still there. "You should probably come in," I said. She stepped inside. She was careful with the door frame. She looked at my apartment the way a person looks at a place they have thought about for a long time and are now comparing against the version in their memory. My apartment was not impressive. Couch, a desk with a monitor that needed cleaning, a bookshelf organized in a system that only made sense to me and possibly also her, apparently because she looked at it for a moment longer than the other things. "You kept the books alphabetical by the author's home country," she said. "It made sense at the time," I said. She looked at me. "It still makes sense," I said. I went to the kitchen and put the kettle on because it was either that or stand in the middle of the room asking questions I already knew I was not going to like the answers to. I had 2 mugs. I used both of them. I did not ask if she wanted tea because it felt like the wrong question for a woman who had just informed me across a 3:00 a.m. doorstep that it was time to return somewhere I had no conscious memory of leaving. She sat on my couch. It held her. I noted this with a relief that was probably disproportionate. The marks on her throat kept their rhythm, slow and blue and very old. The marks on my hand sat quiet, the way a phone sits quiet right after a call. "You were not ready for." I brought the tea. I sat in the chair across from her. The clock on the microwave said 3:31. My kettle took exactly 4 minutes. I had stood in the kitchen for 17 minutes before I turned it on. She wrapped both hands around the mug, 4 fingers on each hand, long and steady. She held the mug the way someone holds something warm when the warmth is the point. I said, "You called me human." "You are human," she said. "You said it like a name." She looked at me over the rim of the mug. "Your name is Marcus Webb. You are 36 years old. You work in information technology support. You keep your apartment at 67 degrees. You have not been surprised by a single news story about first contact in the past 4 years. I had not been. Every headline about an anomalous signal or unidentified atmospheric event hit me with the specific emotional weight of hearing something I had been expecting and had simply been waiting for the world to catch up to. I thought I was calm about it. I thought I was just well adjusted. "Who are you?" I said. She set the mug down on the coaster I had put out for her without thinking about it, the coaster that had been sitting on the coffee table for 3 years, waiting for something, apparently. "My name is Valindra," she said, "Queen, sovereign of the Nth Conquered, commander of the Pale Corridor, first among the assembled voices." She said it the way someone reads a job title on a form, factual, slightly bored by its own length. "That is a lot of titles," I said. "You helped me choose them," she said. The room went very quiet. Outside, somewhere down the street, a Car moved through a puddle. My refrigerator made the low hum it always made at night. The clock said 3:33. I looked at my hands again. The marks were still just marks, just old lines in old skin that no doctor had ever found interesting enough to investigate. Further, something in my chest was doing a thing it had never done in 36 years of being. Marcus Webb, it was not fear. I knew fear was useful and loud and pointed at specific things. This was recognition. The worst kind, the kind that arrives before you are ready and does not wait for you to understand it before it opens every door in the house. I said, I don't remember. I know, she said. I don't remember anything. That was the agreement, she said. That was what you asked for. I stood up. I did not know I was going to do it until I did it. I walked to the window and looked at the courtyard in my reflection again, still unhelpful. My reflection looked like a man who had been living his whole life in a waiting room without knowing it. Behind me she did not move, she did not speak. She sat on my couch in the middle of the night at the edge of something enormous and gave me the room to be small inside it for a moment, because she knew I needed that, because apparently she had always known what I needed or once had an aversion of myself that did not live here anymore. I turned around. Okay, I said. She looked at me. Not okay, I am ready, I said. Okay. I'm listening, there is a difference. The corner of her mouth moved, not quite. A smile, something older than a smile. Something that had been practiced through enough centuries that it had grown past what smiles are for and become something else entirely. I know the difference, she said. I sat back down. The tea was getting cold. We both ignored it. And she began. I heard her out, all of it. It took until 5:00 in the morning. And GT snorts. And GT. The sky outside my window went from black to gray to the tentative, non-committal color of early light, the kind of light that has not yet decided what kind of day it wants to be. I made more tea, then coffee, then I stood in the kitchen and ate half a sleeve of crackers while she talked, because my hands needed something to do and the crackers were there. She talked about the Concord, about what it was, what it had become, what it was losing. She talked about 3 civilizations going quiet in a way that was not silence but was worse than silence, a looping, grinding, going nowhere kind of stillness that her best minds had no framework for. She talked about me, not Marcus Webb, IT. Support 3667. Degrees, the other one. The one who had stood in a chamber I had no memory of and made an agreement I had no access to and gone under in a way that took everything with it, on purpose, by choice, with full understanding of what that cost. I had chosen this, the forgetting, the 36 years, the water stains on the ceiling with their secret names. I had chosen Dave and his 2:00 a.m. lemon and the bookshelf organized by the author's home country, and the microwave clock, and the feeling of never quite being surprised by anything that should have surprised me. All of it was chosen, deliberate, the architecture of a self built by someone I could not remember being. I sat with that for a long time. She sat across from me and let me. At some point I said, why 36 years? She said, you needed enough loss to carry weight, not enough to collapse under it. I thought about that. I thought about the people I had known and lost in. Ordinary human ways, the neighbor I had never spoken to, whose moving truck I watched leave on a Tuesday. The job I had before this one, the city. Before this one, the version of my life that had ended with nothing dramatic and everything quiet. I had not thought of those things as data, I had thought of them as just living. You designed it, I said. We designed it together, she said. You were very specific. You did not want glory, you did not want a grand human life full of extraordinary events. You said ordinary loss is the only kind that teaches anything real. I looked at the ceiling. Veron was still. Up there, the pale corridor was still damp. I was right, I said, not proud, just stating it. You were, she said. I got up and went to the closet in the hallway. I did not know why. My feet made the decision, and I followed them, which was a pattern I had accepted as normal somewhere around age 9 and never re-examined. The closet had coats and a vacuum cleaner and 2 boxes I had moved from my last apartment without ever opening. I had told myself they were old. Paperwork, I had told myself I would go through them eventually. I had not gone through them. I pulled the top box down. It was lighter than it should have been. Inside was not paperwork. Inside was one object. I cannot tell you what it looked like in English because English does not have the right shapes for it. It was small enough to hold in both hands. It was the color of something that has no color, which sounds like evasion but is not. It had weight the way a decision has weight, not physically heavy but present, in a way that everything else in the room slightly reorganized itself around. When I touched it, it hummed. Not loud, not musical, a frequency that bypassed my ears and landed somewhere behind my sternum and stayed there. I sat down on the floor of the hallway. Just sat, the object in both hands. Hum going through me like a current, too low to be dangerous and too constant to ignore. I heard her stand. I heard her walk across the room. She sat down on the floor next to me, not close enough to crowd, close enough to be there. She did not say anything. We sat on the floor of my hallway at 5:00 in the morning, and she let me hold the thing that was mine and not yet mine, and it had been waiting in a cardboard box for a day I had never consciously known was coming. Outside a bird started, then another. The gray outside the window moved toward something almost like color. I said, I am angry. I know, she said. Not at you. I know that too. At myself, the other one, the one who did this and left me here with no note. She was quiet for a moment, then she said, he left you the box. I looked at the object in my hands. The hum had not changed, steady, patient. Ancient. That is a very small note, I said. He knew you would find it when you were ready, she said, not a day before. I thought about that version of me, standing somewhere I could not picture, in a body that was mine but not this one, making choices with full information and clear eyes and the kind of certainty I had never once felt. Inside this skin, making the agreement, asking for the ordinary life, asking for exactly 67 degrees and Dave and the crackers and the microwave clock, asking to forget all of it so he could come back carrying something real. I should have been furious at him. I was a little, but I also understood him the way you understand yourself in old photographs. The logic was there, the reasoning was sound. I just had not been consulted. which was, I suppose, the whole point. I set the object back in the box. Carefully, it did not resist. I got up off the floor, I went to the kitchen and made another cup of coffee. Because it was almost 6:00 and I was not going back to sleep, and my body had opinions about that. I said from the kitchen, "Tell me what." They lost the 3 civilizations. She was quiet for long enough that I looked around the corner. She was still on the floor, sitting with her legs folded beneath her in a way that should not have worked for a frame that size but did. Her hands were in her lap, her markings were slower now. The blue had gone darker, closer to the color of deep water. "Not yet," she said. "Why?" "Because that is not the next thing you need," she said. "The next thing you need is sleep and food and a day to be angry, and then we will talk about what they lost." I looked at her, 7 ft of her folded on my hallway floor, patient as something that has waited long enough that patience has become structural. "You came all this way," I said. "I came the distance I needed to come." She said, "I will wait the time I need to wait." I drank my coffee standing at the counter. "I do not have a guest room," I said. "The couch is adequate," she said. "You are 7 ft tall. I have slept in worse configurations." She said, "I once spent 4 months aboard a vessel the size of this kitchen during a conflict I will tell you about later, when you have more context for it." I thought about that. 4 months vessel, the size of my kitchen. "Was it a bad conflict?" I said. "It was the kind that changes what the word conflict means afterward," she said. I nodded. I finished the coffee. "Okay," I said, "I am going to sleep for 3 hours. When I wake up I want the full version, all of it, no diplomatic gaps." She inclined her head, a single precise movement, the kind of acknowledgement that comes from someone who has run out of patience for ceremony but still observes it because it costs nothing and means something. I went to my room. I lay down on my bed. I stared at Varan on the ceiling. My palms were not glowing, but they were warm in both hands right along the old marks. I closed my eyes. I did not dream. Or if I did, I dreamed in a language that my waking mind did not have access to, which was at that point a perfectly accurate description of my entire situation. She was still on the couch when I woke up 3 hours and 12 minutes later for the microwave. She had not taken off the coat. She sat with her back straight and her eyes open, which meant she either did not sleep or slept in a way that looked exactly like being awake, which I decided not to ask about yet. I made eggs. I did not ask if she ate eggs. She looked at the plate I set in front of her and ate them in a precise and thoughtful way that suggested she was cataloging the experience. "Well," I said. "Better than the microwave food," she said. "You have not had my microwave food. I have been monitoring your routines for 11 days, she said with the tone of someone reporting a weather observation. I held my fork. "Monitoring," I said. "Ensuring your safety," she said. "There are parties who are aware of your return." "Parties. Some are enthusiastic," she said. "Others are less so." I put the fork down. "How much less so?" She considered this. "We will get to that in the full version. That is not comforting." "It was not intended to be comforting," she said. "It was intended to be accurate. Those are different things." I picked the fork back up. We ate. The morning light was doing its best with my kitchen window, which faced Easton caught about 40 minutes of direct sun before the building next door blocked it. I had arranged my entire morning schedule around those 40 minutes for 3 years without consciously knowing why. She watched the light move across the table. Her markings shifted color just slightly from the deep sleeping blue toward something warmer, something in the red range, but further along the spectrum than red, the color that exists past red that human eyes can almost see on good days. You like the light, I said. Our star is older, she said, cooler. The light here is aggressive in a way that is not unpleasant. I thought about what it meant to live under a cooler star, to have a sun that was quieter, more resigned. Is it far, I said, where we are going? Not in any way that will matter to you, she said. Distance becomes a different question past a certain point. That is a very diplomatic answer. I am practicing, she said. I am told I can be direct to the point of being difficult. Who told you that? She looked at me. Right, I said, me, the other one. You said it with considerable affection, she said. I stood up and took the plates to the sink. I washed them, stood there with the warm water running over my hands, watching the soap go down the drain, doing the ordinary small thing because the large things were lining up outside the kitchen window, and I needed a moment more of ordinary before I let them in. Valindra, I said. Yes. What did they lose, the 3 civilizations? I turned off the water, dried my hands, turned around. I am ready for it now. She looked at me for a long moment. Her hands were flat on the table. Her markings had gone still. Then she told me, and I stood in my kitchen in the morning light for a long time afterward, not moving, not speaking, understanding for the first time why a version of me had thought 36 years of ordinary human loss was exactly the right preparation for this specific moment, because what those 3 civilizations had lost was so large and so final and so without any possible reversal that there was only one kind of being in the known universe who had any framework for surviving it, the kind that had been practicing on smaller losses their entire lives, the kind that got up in the morning anyway. I dried my hands a second time, even though they were already dry. Okay, I said, tell me what I need to do. She did not answer immediately. She stood up from the table and went to the window where the last of the 40-minute light was finishing its visit, going gold, at the edges starting to thin. There are 3 species, she said. The Veth, the Aran, the Kaolin, each of them among the oldest within the conquered, each of them civilizations that had outlasted wars and extinctions, and the collapse of the physical conditions that originally produced them. Survivors, I said. The highest order of survivor, she said. They had survived everything that had ever been thrown at them. Their histories were built on the architecture of endurance, their philosophies centered on continuation. Their art, their language, their entire framework of meaning was organized around the concept of going on. And then they stopped going on, I said. She turned from the window. They did not stop. That is the crucial thing to understand. They did not break down or go silent or cease to function. They are present, they are awake, they are thinking every moment about the thing they lost. They cannot stop thinking about it. They loop through it over and over, examining it from every angle applying every tool of logic and analysis and philosophical framework they have ever developed, and none of it resolves. Because loss does not resolve, I said. She looked at me. No, it does not. You cannot logic your way through grief. I said, you can only carry it until it becomes part of the load and you stop noticing the extra weight. That is precisely what they cannot do. She said they are too rational, their minds are too precise. Every time they attempt to carry it and move forward, the irresolution of it stops them. The fact that it is still there, unfinished. Fact that what was lost stays lost, regardless of what they do. Their entire framework of civilization is built on problems that can be solved. And this is a problem that cannot be solved, only survived, and they have no architecture for surviving the unsolvable. I sat down at the table. I put my hands flat on the surface, the marked side up. The lines quiet in the morning light. But humans do, I said. Humans lose things constantly, she said. From the first year of life, small losses that teach the shape of loss. Before the large ones arrive, you lose objects, friendships, versions of yourself, people. You lose futures you were counting on, plans, beliefs. You lose things daily that you never even name as losses because you have become so fluent in the language of losing that you no longer notice yourself speaking it. And we keep going, I said. You keep going, she said, not because you are stronger, not because you feel it less. The data suggests you feel it more acutely than almost any species we have studied. You keep going because you do not fully understand the alternative, and because somewhere in the architecture of the ordinary human day there is always something small that makes continuing feel like the slightly more interesting option. I thought about my 40 minutes of morning light, the specific perfect temperature of a cup of coffee at 7:00 in the morning, the way the crack in my ceiling above the bookshelf had been slowly growing for 2 years in a direction that I had started to find narratively satisfying. Dave and his lemon, I said. She tilted her head. My neighbor, I said. He knocked on my door at 2:00 in the morning looking for a lemon. He came back with 1:40 minutes later looking like he had one. Something. I paused. That is why I keep going sometimes, because I want to know if he ever explains the lemon. She was quiet for a moment. Something moved behind her eyes that I could not name. That, she said, is exactly it. That is the precise thing. The Veth and the Oron and the Kaling have no equivalent of the lemon. They have meaning systems, philosophical structures, grand frameworks of purpose and continuation. But they have no lemon, nothing small and absurd and stubbornly present. That makes tomorrow slightly more interesting than not arriving at it. And they are stuck, I said. They have been in the recursion for 11 of your months, she said. 11 months of looping. Their civilizations are still technically functional. Governance continues. Infrastructure holds, but nothing new is being made. No children are being born. No art, no music, no decisions that reach beyond the next administrative cycle. They are present, but they have stopped being future-facing, and for civilizations of their age and depth, that is an extinction that takes longer, but arrives just as completely. The morning light was gone from the window. The kitchen had gone back to its ordinary self, unremarkable in mine. What did they lose? I said. You still have not told me the specific thing. She sat back down across from me. Her markings had gone to the deep warm color, the one past red. She looked at me with those ancient steady eyes, and she told me, I am not going to write it here, not because it is too large to put into words, though it is, not because English does not have the shapes for it, though it does not, but because the moment she said it, I understood why a version of me had gone under for 36 years instead of bringing his full self to this problem. The full self would have been overwhelmed. The full self had the context to understand the true scale of what had been lost, and the true scale was the kind that collapses whatever it lands on. Marcus Webb, who had lost ordinary things for 36 years, who had learned to carry weight in small increments until carrying was just the condition of being alive, could hold it. Not easily, not without cost, but he could hold it and still be standing. After I sat with it, I let it settle. I did the thing I had apparently been training to do my entire life without knowing I was training, which was to take something enormous and irresolvable and let it become part of the load instead of the whole weight. After a while I said, I need to pack a bag. She looked at me. You said it is time to return, I said. I assume we are not walking. We are not walking, she said. How long do I have? As long as you need, she said, within reason. Define reason. 2 of your days, she said. I nodded. I looked around my kitchen. The microwave clock said 9:47. My apartment smelled like eggs and coffee and the specific combination of ordinary things that had been my whole world for 3 years. I need to cancel something at work, I said. That has been handled, she said. I looked at her. 11 days, she said. Right, I said, the monitoring. Your supervisor believes you have a family situation requiring immediate travel. I do not have family, I said. Your supervisor does not know that, she said. I stood up. I went to the doorway of the kitchen and looked at my apartment, the bookshelf with its country of origin system, the couch where she had sat upright all night in a coat not designed for human furniture, the desk, the monitor that needed cleaning, the ceiling with Veron, and the pale corridor. I had named them correctly, apparently. I had been naming things correctly my whole life without knowing why. Velindra, I said. Yes. The things they lost, I said, is there anything left, any version of it that still exists somewhere? Her marking slowed. No, she said. Then we are not going to fix it, I said. We are going to help them carry it. Yes, she said. And I am the only one who knows how. In the known galaxy, she said, yes, you are the only one who has done what you have done and come back from it with the pattern intact. I stood there for another moment. Okay, I said. I went to the closet, not the whole closet with the box, the bedroom closet, with the ordinary things, the clothes, and the worn-in shoes, and the bag I had bought 3 years ago on a sale I had no logical reason to take advantage of, because I never went anywhere. I packed 3 changes of clothes, my laptop because the instinct was too strong to argue with, a charger, the photograph from my kitchen shelf, the one of a street in a city I had moved to for reasons I could never explain. Golden afternoon light on wet pavement. No people, just the light and the road, and the sense of being somewhere exactly as much as you needed to be there. I went to the hallway closet and I took the box with the object in it. I stood at the door of my apartment for a moment, then I turned around and went back to the kitchen, and I took the coaster off the coffee table, the one that had been sitting there waiting for 3 years, and I put it in my bag as well. Some things you just know. I met her at the door. She was standing in the hallway where I had first seen her. The fluorescent light above her flickering its same uncertain flicker, her markings at their full warm color now, steady and present, and very old. She looked at my bag. "You packed light," she said. "I was told I am the most important person in the known galaxy," I said. "I assumed someone else would handle the luggage." She looked at me for a moment with those eyes that had lived through things I had not yet remembered. Then she said, "Come then." I pulled the door shut behind me. The lock clicked, and I walked out of the ordinary life I had built for exactly this purpose, down a hallway that smelled like carpet cleaner, into something I was not ready for, and was, by 36 years of careful, invisible preparation, completely equipped for, which is apparently the human condition, or at least mine. The ship was not what the movies had promised. No vast gleaming corridors, no dramatic lighting, no enormous viewports showing the galaxy arranged for maximum visual impact. It was quiet, the way libraries are. Quiet not because noise is forbidden, but because the things inside are old enough to have gotten past the need for it. The walls were a material that sat between stone and living matter, warm to the touch in the specific way that means something has been here long enough to have the temperature of the room. The light came from no identifiable source, which should have been disorienting, and was instead just the light, steady and present. She led me through it without explaining it, which I found I preferred. My bag was over my shoulder. The box was under my arm. I followed her, and I looked at the things we passed, and I catalogued them the way I had always catalogued things, with the quiet, systematic attention of someone who had been paying this kind of attention their whole life, and was only now understanding why there were others, members of the conquered. I understood without being told, the way you understand things in a place you have never been, that your feet already know the layout of. They saw me, and they reacted in the range between reverence and barely concealed interest, and I decided on my first pass through that hallway that I was not going to perform anything for any of them. Not history, not importance, not the weight of what I was supposedly carrying. I was a man in a sweatshirt with a bag and a box, and 11 months of other people's grief waiting for me somewhere ahead. That was enough to be for now. She brought me to a room. It was small, and it was mine. That much was clear immediately, in the way the temperature was exactly right, and the light was the specific quality of the 40 minutes of morning sun, and there was a surface to set the box on that was exactly the right height. "Rest," she said. "I rested," I said. "Properly," she said. "In transit we have time." "How much time?" "Enough," she said. "The recursion has been running for 11 months. Another day will not change its course, but you arriving depleted might." I set the bag down. I set the box on the surface that was exactly the right height. "Velindra," I said. "Yes." "When I get there to the Veth, the Orem, the Callan," I paused. "I do not have a speech prepared." "Good," she said. "I do not have a plan. Better, she said. I do not know what I am going to do. She stood in the doorway of the small room that was mine, and she looked at me with an expression I was beginning to learn, the one that was not quite a smile but had been practicing toward one for long enough that it had become something more patient and more true. You are going to do what humans do. She said, you are going to show up. That is all. That is the entire plan. She left. I sat on the edge of the surface that served as a bed and was exactly the right firmness, and I held the object from the box in both hands and let it hum through me, slow and steady, the frequency behind the sternum, the one that was not quite sound. I thought about Dave and his lemon. I thought about the 40 minutes of morning light. I thought about the water stains on my ceiling and the names I had given them, and the way I had been naming things correctly my whole life without knowing. I was fluent in a language I had never been taught. I thought about the version of me that had stood somewhere in a chamber and made all the right choices and had the foresight to leave a box in a closet and a coaster on a coffee table. He was smarter than me, probably, but he had not had 36 years of ordinary loss making him into this specific shape, and this specific shape was, apparently, the only one that fit what was coming. I set the object back in the box. I lay down. The light in the room adjusted to the quality of a cloudy afternoon, which was not the light I would have chosen, but was, I understood, the light I had fallen asleep under most often across my 36 years, the light my body recognized as the signal for rest. Someone had mapped that. Someone had thought of it ahead of time. He really was smarter than me. I closed my eyes. I slept without dreaming again, or dreamed in the other language again, and this time I was not sure they were different things. She woke me by opening the door. No. Knock, the door opening was enough. I was awake before she spoke, which told me something about the light in the room, or the way the ship moved in a way I could not quite feel but must have registered somewhere. We are approaching, she said. I sat up. The box was where I had left it. My bag was where I had put it. The photograph was still in the bag. I could feel it through the fabric, the weight of a street in afternoon light, ordinary. And mine. How long did I sleep? I said. Long enough, she said. That is not an answer. 18 hours, she said. Your body required it. It will require more. After. I stood up. I did not ask her to give me a moment. I was done needing moments. Whatever was on the other side of this door and this corridor and this ship was waiting with an 11-month head start, and I was not going to be the reason it waited longer. I picked up the box. I left the bag. Do I need anything? I said. Nothing you don't already have, she said. We walked. The corridors held the same quiet library weight as before. The others moved through them with the careful deliberateness of people in the proximity of something significant, and I did not look at them, not because I was avoiding them, but because there was nothing that needed to be performed for them yet. She brought me to a chamber at the center of the ship. It was large. The walls had the same material as the rest of the ship, but the light in here was different, higher, cleaner, the kind of light that suggests things are about to be decided. Around the perimeter stood members of the Concord, advisors, officials, people who had spent 11 months applying every tool available to them and finding none of them adequate. They looked at me with the kind of look that is harder to hold than hostility. Hope, when it has been waiting for a long time, has an intensity to it that is almost aggressive. It wants something from you before you have agreed to give it. I stood in the center of the chamber. I set the box on the floor at my feet. Velindra took her position to my left. She did not stand behind me. She never stood behind me. I looked at the assembled faces, and I said in a voice that was more steady than I expected, "Tell me what you need me to do." One of them, a tall figure with markings that were entirely silver, still and cold, said, "We need you to reach them." "How?" I said. "We do not know," he said. "If we knew, we would not have sent for you." I thought about that. I thought about what Velindra had said about showing up being the plan. "Take me to them," I said. "They are not here," the silver-marked figure said. "They are on their home territories, 3 separate locations." "Then we go to them," I said. "All 3, he said. "One at a time," I said, "starting with whichever one has been in the recursion the longest." There was a pause. The assembled figures looked at each other with the look of people who have been trying to solve a problem with architecture and are now being asked to try geography instead. Velindra said nothing. She had already told me what I needed to know. She was letting me find the rest of it. "The Veth," the silver-marked figure said. "They were first." "Then the Veth," I said. I picked up the box. "I need a chair," I said, "in whatever room I am meeting them, something low. Not a throne, not a platform, just a chair, the kind you sit in when you are talking to someone on equal ground." The silver-marked figure looked at me for a moment, then he nodded. "And I need water," I said, "not for ceremony, because I will probably talk for a long time and my throat gets dry." Another pause. "We can arrange water," he said. "Good," I said, "then let us go." The Veth planet was the color of winter. Not the pleasant kind of winter, not snow and stillness and the clean cold that makes the air taste like something. The kind of winter that has been going on too long, the flat, exhausted gray of a season that has forgotten it is supposed to end. We landed outside what had been, the briefing told me, one of the great meeting halls of the Veth civilization. A place built for 10,000 and now holding in the main chamber approximately 40. The rest of the population moved through their days doing the things required to keep a civilization technically alive. But they moved through it the way water moves through a blocked channel, present, going nowhere. The 40 in the main hall were the ones deepest in the recursion, the ones their own people were most worried about, the ones who had stopped leaving the hall entirely. I walked in alone. Velindra stayed at the door, her choice not mine, which I understood was a message to the Veth. Before I even opened my mouth, she was not solving this, she was witnessing it. I walked to the chair they had placed in the center of the hall, low, ordinary, exactly what I had asked for. I sat down. The 40 Veth looked at me. They were not threatening, they were not hostile, they had the look of people who have been thinking the same thought for so long that their faces had settled into the shape of it, grief that has gone from an experience to a condition. I knew that look, not from my 36 years, from something older, something the object in the box beside my chair carried in its hum. I did not stand, I did not raise my voice, I did not prepare them for what I was going to say. I started talking. Not about them, not about the thing they had lost, not about the recursion or they conquered or why I was there. I talked about a Tuesday, a specific Tuesday in my 3rd year in my apartment when I had received news that something I had counted on was gone. Not catastrophically gone, not the scale they understood, an ordinary human loss, the kind that lands quietly and then sits in the chest for a long time. Afterward, I had gotten the news in the morning. I had gone to work. I had come home. I had stood in my kitchen and looked at the window for a while. Then I had made dinner. Then I had gone to sleep. I described it in the smallest possible detail, the specific sound a pan made on the burner, the exact quality of the light in the kitchen at 7:00 in the evening, the way the dinner was not particularly good, but was hot and mine, and was enough. I did not explain what this was supposed to mean. I did not say the words grief or survival or continuation. I just described the Tuesday, all of it, in plain, simple language that required no translation. And then I described the Wednesday. Not a good Wednesday, not a Wednesday where things were better, a Wednesday where the loss was still exactly where I had left it on Tuesday, sitting in the chest, not smaller, not larger, just there. But there had been coffee in the morning, and the walk from the door to the elevator had had a specific patch of light from the lobby window that landed on the floor at an angle that was, for reasons I had never examined, mildly satisfying. And that had been enough to make the Wednesday slightly more interesting than not arriving at it. The 40 Veth were looking at me. They were still in the recursion. I was not naive enough to think a Tuesday and a Wednesday were going to break 11 months of civilizational paralysis. But 2 of them had stopped looping. Just for a moment, just long enough to listen. It was enough for now. I took a sip of water. I kept talking. I will not tell you how long it took. Partly because I lost track, partly because time in the presence of grief, genuine grief, civilizational grief, moves in a way that does not correspond to any clock I know how to read. I will tell you that I talked to the Veth for a long time, then I slept, then I talked more, then we went to the Orem, then the Kaelin. 3 territories, 3 chambers, 3 sets of faces holding the shape of the same unsolvable loss. And each time I sat down in the low chair, and I did not promise them resolution because it did not exist. I did not offer them a framework or a philosophy or a grand structure of meaning. I offered them Tuesdays, I offered them Wednesdays, I offered them the specific, irrational way that ordinary life insists on continuing to contain small things worth noticing even when the large things are irresolvable and heavy and permanent. I told them about Dave and the lemon. I am not exaggerating when I say that the lemon landed harder than almost anything else I said, something about the image of a being knocking on a door at 2 in the morning for a lemon and returning 40 minutes later with one reached them in a place the larger things could not, because it was absurd. And absurdity, I had come to understand, is what life does when it cannot be dignified. It reaches for something small and slightly ridiculous and stubbornly present, and it holds on. I am not going to describe the moment. The recursion broke because it did not break the way things break in movies. There was no sudden clarity, no collective exhale, no visible change in the room. It was gradual. 12 of the Veth's 40 started sleeping in their own homes. Again, 3 of the Aaron began a conversation. They had been unable to finish for 11 months. One of the Calling, an elder who had not spoken in 7 months, asked someone near her what she had eaten that morning. Small things, ordinary things. The beginning of Wednesdays. I found Velindra when it was over, or as over as this kind of thing ever gets. She was standing in a corridor on the Veth territory, looking out through a high window at the winter sky. It was doing something slightly interesting at the horizon, a thin line of color that had no business being there given how exhausted the season looked. I stood next to her. I was tired in a way that went deeper than sleep could reach, the kind of tired that is also underneath a kind of relief. She did not thank me. It would have been too small for what had happened, and we both knew it. I did not say you are welcome, same reason. After a while I said, my dentist appointment was on Tuesday. She was quiet for a moment. I will have someone call, she said. I leaned against the wall beside her. She let me. We watched the thin, stubborn line of color at the horizon do its small, unremarkable, entirely necessary work. The galaxy, it turned out, did not need us to be warriors. It did not need us to be heroes or strategists or beings of exceptional cosmic power. It needed us to know how to lose things and show up anyway, to know about Tuesdays and Wednesdays, and the 40 minutes of morning light and the neighbor with the inexplicable lemon. 36 years of practice. Ordinary, deliberate, chosen. It turned out that was exactly enough.